Hello there. Today I want to discuss the case of Amy Mihaljevic. I remember distinctly as a child seeing the missing person flyer stuck to one of our cabinets that we had in the house, held by a magnet. She went missing in October of 1989 from Bay Village, Ohio, and at that time she was only 10 years old. In 1989, I was a 7-year-old living in Cleveland, Ohio, which is not too far from where she disappeared. I remember this case resonated with me for a long time because of how close in age and location she was to me. Amy Renee Mihaljevic was born December 11, 1978. She was a bright and bubbly outgoing fifth grader who lived in Bay Village, Ohio with her parents, Margaret and Mark, and her older brother, Jason. Bay Village, which is a suburb of Cleveland, was considered a safe place to raise a family because of its nice neighborhoods and low crime rates. Friday, October 27th, 1989, was like any other day for the Mihaljevic family. Her parents went to work, and Amy and her brother rode their bikes to school. This day was just like any other day. The only difference was that Amy failed to return home. The usual protocol for Amy and her brother was to call their mother at work to check in and let her know that they had gotten home from school. The 5th grade class let out before the 7th grade class, and Amy was usually home an hour before her brother. However, when Jason arrived home, Amy was not there. He called his mother that afternoon about 3:15 p.m., stating Amy wasn't home, which didn't immediately set off any alarm bells because she had recalled that Amy said something about possibly staying late after school to try out for choir. Perhaps that day was today. She told her son not to worry and to call her back in a little bit. About a half hour later, Jason called her back, and again, he let her know that Amy still wasn't home, which at this time, it did give her some cause for concern. Something in her gut, call it a mother's intuition, told her that something was wrong. Just as she was gathering her things, preparing to leave work early, the phone rang, and to her relief, it was Amy. She asked Amy how the tryouts for choir went, and Amy said, "Okay." She asked Amy how she was doing, and Amy responded with, "I'm fine." It was a very brief conversation between mother and daughter that ended with the usual, "I'll see you later and I love you." Nothing really out of the ordinary. One report I read stated that Margaret had asked Amy if she was at home, and Amy told her that she was, but then I saw another report that said that Margaret assumed that Amy was calling her from home. So I think it's safe to say that Amy's mom believed that she was at home when she made that call. Anyhow, as Margaret tried to get back to work, she had this nagging feeling that just wouldn't go away, that something still wasn't right, and she started to replay that conversation she had with Amy in her head. Knowing how much of a little chatterbox Amy was, it seemed very odd to her that she only answered her mother's questions with single-word answers such as okay or fine. Margaret decided to leave work early that day anyhow, and she arrived home about 4:30 p.m. As soon as she entered the house, Jason, Amy's brother, said, "Amy still isn't here." Those words sent a wave of panic through her. She immediately turned around and rushed out the door and back into her car. She drove to Bay Middle School. The building was closed, though, and the parking lot was empty. Ominously, though, she found Amy's aqua-colored bike left unattended at the bike rack. In that instant, Margaret knew something terrible was going on. From the school, Margaret rushed directly to the Bay Village Police Department. There, 2 police officers sat Margaret down and listened to what she had to say. They asked questions and took notes. At this point, it had only been less than 1 hour since Amy had called her mom, and 9 out of 10 times this wouldn't immediately raise any red flags, and police would most likely keep a lookout for her. But something in the way that her mom told that story, she knew her daughter best, raised alarm bells, and they immediately took action. At 5:15 p.m., the first bolo, which is a be on the lookout, was released, giving a full description of Amy to all of the city's patrolling officers, as well as the neighboring city police departments. At 6:30 p.m., Amy's father, Mark, returned home from work to find the police in his house and Margaret in a panic. All he knew was that Amy was just missing. They searched the house from top to bottom, they searched the yard, and they searched the neighboring yards. Margaret called all of Amy's friends, but no one had seen her.
By 7 p.m., a massive search party was being organized. Family, friends, neighbors, volunteers, and police searched a ravine that ran straight through the Lake Erie that was near her home. Throughout the night, all that could be heard was the cries of these searchers calling out Amy's name. The search went on for hours, but there were no signs of the missing 10-year-old. It was becoming more and more apparent that Amy must have been abducted. Police knew statistically that the odds of recovering a child who's been kidnapped and recovering them alive drastically drop after the first 6 hours. This was quickly growing bigger than the police could handle alone, so the FBI got involved. Friday night soon turned to Saturday morning. The police and FBI canvassed the neighborhood, speaking to all of the residents. It would be one of these neighbors who would provide the first big break in the case. This particular neighbor's daughter, who had been a friend of Amy's, gave the investigators some truly troubling information, and a grim picture of what happened began to emerge. The days leading up to Amy's disappearance, a mysterious man had been calling the Mihaljevic home and speaking with Amy. Amy, however, did not disclose this information to her parents. This friend's account about these phone calls were confirmed by a few other of Amy's friends that she had let in on what she called a secret. Her brother even overheard part of a conversation that Amy had during one of these phone calls. It's unclear how many times this man called the home, but it was now evident that Amy had lied about the after-school choir audition. Through these phone calls, he was able to earn the trust of Amy by claiming either he was a family friend or a co-worker of her mother. The man told Amy he wanted her to meet him at the Bay Square Shopping Center, which was just a block away from her school. Here, he would give her $45 to purchase a special present for her mom, congratulating her on a promotion she had received at work. In reality, she had not received a promotion, but had started a new job, which to Amy may have seemed like a promotion, making this man's claims seem more legitimate to her. He even hinted at buying Amy a bonus gift for helping him out. Of course, neither her mom or her dad were aware of these phone calls or the secret plan Amy had made with this man until after the fact. That afternoon, when school let out at 2:04 p.m., Amy and two of her friends walked the short distance from school to the Bay Village Shopping Center. The shopping center was a local hangout for many of the middle schoolers. It was a nice day in October and the weather was in the 70s. Once there, Amy chose to wait outside the Baskin-Robbins store as the other two friends went on and did other things in the plaza. And it would be there that they would last see Amy around 3 p.m. Several people saw her standing there, and she looked to be waiting for someone. Eventually, they did see a man who was wearing glasses approach Amy. They chatted briefly, and he then placed his hand on the middle of her back, guiding her towards the parking lot, presumably to his car. The friends weren't paying full attention to what Amy was doing, so they didn't see where they went or what car they may have gotten into. They didn't have a reason to be concerned. There was no struggle or altercation, nothing that would draw their attention further. Some reports I read stated that the witnesses who last saw Amy assumed that the man that Amy was with was her father. Not only was this man not her father, but he was a complete unknown to the family. This man wasn't impulsive. He was calculating and patient, like a lion crouching low in the tall grass, waiting for the perfect moment to pounce on an unsuspecting animal at a watering hole. He knew where Amy lived, and he knew her phone number. He knew where her mother worked and what time she would arrive home. He knew the neighborhood, and he knew the shopping center. Did this man know Amy's mother? Was he familiar with the family? Did he work at her school? Was he a neighbor? All of these questions and more have never been answered. He most likely relished the fact that he could gain the trust and convince her to keep their conversation a secret. He probably silently congratulated himself that he was able to lure her under the premise of doing something nice for her mother. He was bold and willing to take the risk of meeting her in broad daylight in a busy shopping center where plenty of people could see him. The two eyewitnesses, both school children around 11 years in age, gave the FBI a description of what this man looked like. A white male, 35 to 40 years of age, slightly muscular build, dark, wavy hair, possibly graying in certain areas, and maybe a bald spot. He was between 5'8" and 5'10" in height, with round glasses. One of the two witnesses didn't remember seeing glasses while the other one did. He might have been wearing a tan jacket as well. Using the descriptions and what the two witnesses recalled, an FBI sketch artist came up with a rough image of what this man looked like. The The composite was shown to Amy's parents, but they did not know anyone that resembled this man. 24 hours after Amy went missing, the police released the sketch to all of the local news outlets for everyone to see. During this report, a grief-stricken, tearful Margaret, Amy's mother, begged Amy to do anything she could to get in contact with the police or to call her parents at home. This is actual audio of Amy's mother on that news report pleading for her daughter.
Amy, if you can hear me, you do anything you can to contact an officer of the law or call us at home.
The police and the FBI knew that the phone calls made to Amy's home held the key to identifying who this man was and possibly where they could find Amy. Sadly, the technology in 1989 wasn't as sophisticated as it is today, so they were unable to trace the call's origin. In 1989, the phone companies only recorded long-distance phone numbers that were dialed, and this call was made locally. They persevered, though, and decided to send out a letter to all the parents whose children attended Amy's school. The letter was an inquiry, trying to determine if any other children had received similar calls. Then they got a lead. The summer before Amy was kidnapped, a girl who lived in a neighboring city recalled the following. One day, while babysitting her younger brother, the phone rang, and he answered it. Sensing he had been on the line a little longer than he should have been, she came into the room asking him who he was talking to, and he shook his head as if he did not know. She took the phone from him and got on the line. There on the other end was a man asking her if she wanted to help him pick out a present for her mother. He claimed he was an old friend and that he hadn't seen her mom for a very long time. After the phone call, the girl, who was a few years older than Amy, felt something wasn't right about that call. She told her mom about it when she came home, and the mother was very concerned and filed a police report. Just a few short months later, she saw the news reports and learned of the details surrounding Amy's disappearance. She couldn't believe how familiar it all sounded. The mother contacted the FBI, and they came out to interview the girl at the house. While there, one of the FBI agents noticed something peculiar. There, they saw several trophies and ribbons from horse riding competitions in their living room. The agent asked the girl where they kept the horses, and she responded, Holly Hill Farms. Holly Hill Farms was located on the edge of Bay Village. It offered stabling for horses as well as horse riding lessons. When the agent followed up on the lead at Holly Hill, he discovered an incredible coincidence. This was the same stables that young Amy took riding lessons at. She was often a regular there. So now there was a connection. Both girls had spoken to a mysterious man who tried to lure them out, and both girls attended Holly Hill for horse riding lessons. There was a man working at the stables as a caretaker that people described as weird. They said that he paid extra special attention to young girls. He had even interacted with Amy on a few occasions. There had been complaints from some of the other mothers that he had acted inappropriately around their daughters. The man was considered a person of interest. The police and the FBI decided to search the grounds of Holly Hill Farms and the vast fields surrounding it for any pieces of evidence. Officers found a pair of green sweatpants that resembled the pair that Amy had worn the day she went missing. They sent the sweatpants in for analysis, but it was later determined not to be hers. Around this time, a second report surfaced about two sisters who had received similar calls to their house from a man who wanted them to help him buy a present for their mother as well. There was also a handyman who did odd jobs in the neighborhood that Amy lived in, who was considered a person of interest as well, but later they found that this man had a credible alibi. As the weeks turned into months, there wasn't a day that a news report wasn't put out for Amy. Missing flyers were plastered everywhere, in the store windows and in the newspapers. Several local crime shows featured her story, and even America's Most Wanted did a segment on her. A number of searches were held in different locations. Halloween came and went, Thanksgiving passed, Amy's 11th birthday passed right along with Christmas and New Year's, all with no word from Amy. Then, 104 days after she was last seen, the search for Amy finally came to an end on a cold and dreary February morning in a desolate field located in Ashland County, Ohio, which is around 50 miles south of Bay Village. It was there on this quiet county road 1181 on the 8th of February 1990 that a passing jogger was startled after seeing a small figure dressed in a pale green sweatsuit lying face down in the weeds. The jogger ran to the closest farmhouse and called 911. Once police were on the scene, they quickly concluded that this was Amy Mihaljevic. She had been murdered and dumped in the field about 20 feet from the rural farm road. The police searched up and down Route 1181 for any evidence that may have been left behind by her killer. Among the items collected was a long and dirty, ugly green curtain and a blanket of a similar color. These items were found several hundred yards down the road from where Amy's body lay. The murder itself happened someplace unknown, and Amy had been deposited in that field sometime after. Though police have had several suspects or persons of interest over the years, they have never released any names publicly. Many people believe they know who did it, be it by a hunch or through a rumor, but there has never been any concrete evidence connecting any of them to Amy. Amy's autopsy results revealed her cause of death as blunt force trauma to the head. She also had several stab wounds to her neck, which severed her carotid artery, causing her to bleed to death. It is unclear if she was sexually assaulted, but logic would tell you that this was probably her killer's main motivator. Some of that evidence, though, decomposed along with Amy as she lay in that field. Decades after that dirty green curtain and blanket were found, and the involvement of DNA and forensics testing, they were able to analyze some of the hairs that they found on them. They were identified as dog hairs. At the time, Amy had a dog named Jake, and comparing Jake's hairs to the dog hairs on these items, they were found to be very similar. Police believe the curtain and the blanket were used to transport Amy's body. The curtain that was found on the roadway that day was pretty unique, possibly homemade, and police had hoped that someone would recognize it. So far, though, nothing has ever come from it. It's been 30 years since this crime happened, and no one has ever been charged with her murder. Is the killer still alive? Has the killer moved to another state? Is he in prison due to another crime? Or has he blended in with the normal fabric of society? Is he a family man with kids of his own? The killer has to be in his 60s or 70s by now, if he's still alive. The day that Amy's body was found, there were items that she would have had with her the day that she went missing, but these items were never recovered. The FBI believe that the killer may have kept them as mementos. The items, which were turquoise horse earrings, black ankle boots, and a black leather binder with a gold clasp. Amy was buried in Wisconsin in the Highland Memorial Park at the Mihaljevic family plot. A simple memorial was placed on the grounds of the Bay Village City Hall, where her mother and father would visit often. Less than 2 years after Amy's death, her parents divorced. No doubt the strain of losing Amy was a contributing factor. Both were in their own worlds of grief, both dealing with it in their own ways. They grew apart. Amy was described as the can-do kid. She was a real mama's girl, a tomboy, and a lover of the Golden Girls. She also loved the movie Dirty Dancing and was even said to have a crush on Patrick Swayze. Who didn't, right? She loved horses and riding bikes to the Baskin-Robbins for ice cream with her friends. Her father even quoted her as saying that one day she would become president. Sadly, we will never know what Amy was capable of because a selfish man took this all away, leaving a trail of devastation in his wake. Almost 12 years after Amy disappeared, sadly, her mother died from complications of lupus. There are some reports that indicate she may have succumbed to alcohol poisoning as well. An article I found written on October 2nd, 2001 reads, McNulty, who was Amy's mother's, she must have took her maiden name back, moved from the Cleveland area to Las Vegas about a year prior to escape the media spotlight, her mother said. She had been living with her mother, but was asked to leave the apartment about a month prior because her mother said her health was being affected by her daughter's heavy smoking. A very caring, loving person is gone who couldn't get her life back together after Amy disappeared, her mother said. McNulty also suffered from the disease lupus. Margaret McNulty, 54, was found dead Saturday at her Las Vegas apartment from complications due to chronic alcoholism, according to the Clark County coroner in Nevada. She could not get a real hold on a happy life anymore, said McNulty's mother, Henrietta, from her Las Vegas home. Everything just turned her off. I'm sure this is what really brought on her death. She died a broken-hearted woman. As of the year 2020, the FBI is offering a reward of up to $25,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the person who abducted and killed Amy.